Veterans Chronicles is sponsored by the state of Qatar, representing Qatar's commitment to the U.S.
Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Columbus. Our guest today is retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James Harvey III. He's a veteran of World War II and the Korean War. He's also a member of the legendary Tuskegee Airmen. And Colonel Harvey, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
I was born in Montclair, New Jersey, and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania, a little small town called Enaugural Station. You can tell how big that place is, just by the name.
How old were you when Pearl Harbor struck?
Oh, boy, let's see. I was 17.
Do you remember what your immediate reaction was?
The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, so we were at war.
Did you feel...
We weren't at war with them, but no, I didn't feel anything, no.
No instinct to serve at that point?
No.
When you were growing up, did you have any interest or experience in aviation?
No, none.
So
why did I get in aviation?
Well,
I lived in mountaintop, Nungola Station, and a flight of P-40s flew over in formation. I was standing in my yard, and I saw this, and I said, I'd like to do that one day, and that was it.
That was it?
That was it.
So when did you join the service?
I went in March of 43. Did
you enlist?
No. I tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps in January of 43. And they said they weren't taking enlistments at that time. That was the height of the war. So then it dawned on me why they didn't want me. So I was drafted in March of 43 into the Army.
What was your reaction when they said no?
Okay. They're running the show. There's nothing I could do about it.
So, a few months later, you are in the service, though.
Yes.
Then where did you go?
I went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and took my shots, got my uniform, and took a written exam. Then they sent me to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri for 30 days of basic training. And when I finished my basic training, they sent me to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, Army Air Corps engineers, driving bulldozers, graders, carryalls. My mission was to go into the jungles in the Pacific, doze out an area, and build an airfield for aircraft to land on. And we used to go out and practice every day. And I says, no, this isn't for me. So I applied for cadet training, was accepted, and there were 10 of us, 9 whites and myself. We took the exam, 2 of us passed. Then from there I went to Keesler Field for 30 days of basic training, and from there to Tuskegee, and then the rest is history.
What did the training consist of at Tuskegee?
At Tuskegee, primary, basic, and advanced, complete training program. The white cadets, each phase of their training, they went to a different airfield. But since things were segregated at that time, we had everything at 2 airfields. They were both close together, Moulton Field, and they built a brand new airfield for us, Tuskegee Army Airfield. That's where we got our basic and advanced, on that airfield.
So when is the first time you got behind the controls?
Well, that was in, let's see, I don't remember the month. I was at Moulton Field. It was in a PT-19. It wasn't the Stearman. This was a low-wing monoplane, and more like a fighter. And that's what I flew in primary.
What did it feel like the first time you got up there?
It felt good. I'd never experienced anything like it before, of course, but it felt good.
Was it what you expected?
This is great.
Was it what you expected?
I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect, but I enjoyed it. And this is something I can do real easy. See, I was a perfectionist, and perfectionists, they can do anything.
Now, you joined, it was 1943, but you did not make it to Europe, correct?
Correct.
So what were you doing at the time of the conclusion of World War II?
Well, let's put it this way. I finished combat training at Walterboro, South Carolina, in April of 1945. I had my bags packed within 1 hour of catching the train to go to Norfolk, to get on a ship, go over to Europe, and join the group. We got a message saying to hold us. The war in Italy was over, They expected to wind up the whole European theater. Well, Hitler gave up the following month of May, so I would have been on the high seas. So that's why I didn't make it to Europe.
He knew you were coming.
Hitler knew I was coming. That's why he threw in the towel in the following month of May.
That's right. That's right. So after the war, 2 years after the war to be accurate, President Truman desegregates the armed forces.
Right.
What did that mean for you?
Didn't mean a thing. Things continued on the way they were.
So there was no integration?
Nope, none whatsoever.
And
as far as the 332nd goes.
Now, before Korea, and we'll talk a lot about Korea in just a moment, folks can tell by your hat that you did something very interesting in 1949. You were not only at the first Top Gun, you won the first Top Gun.
Correct.
Tell us about it.
Okay. In, I'd say, January of 49, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force sent out a directive to all the fighter groups in the United States that they were to participate in gunnery competition or weapons competition between each squadron and in each group, and they were picked their 3 high scorers as primary members and an alternate member to represent their group at the first ever Top Gun weapons meet to be held at Las Vegas Air Force Base, Nevada. And today it's known as Nellis. Well, the 332nd, which is us, we had scores because we had been to Eglin 7 a month prior. So based on our scores, Captain Temple of the 300th, First Lieutenant Harry Stewart of the 100th, and myself of the 99th were chosen as primary members, and First Lieutenant Halbert Alexander of the 99th as an alternate member. So that was our team. And before we left Lockbourne heading to Las Vegas Air Force Base, we met with Colonel Davis. He was the group commander. And his departing remark was, if you don't win, don't come back. So
no
off we went with those words of encouragement.
Talk about him real briefly. What was it about Davis that made him a good leader?
Well, he was a West Point graduate. And right there, that tells you something. Although he had the silent treatment while he was there, no one spoke to him. He ate by himself. He roomed by himself. He swam by himself in the pool. He was just a loner, you could say. There were 365 in the class. He graduated number 35, and despite all of that stuff. But he was a good man, good man.
All right, so let's get out to Top Gun. What does the competition consist of?
The competition for that meet consisted of aerial gunnery at 20,000 feet, aerial gunnery at 12,000 feet, dive bombing, skip bombing, rocket firing, and panel strafing. Now, skip bombing, you come in very low to the ground, your propeller clearing the ground by about a foot, and when you release your bombs, you're so low they don't have a chance to nose over yet, so they hit flat and skip through the target.
And so as this unfolded, you guys were pretty much in the lead the whole time, right?
We led from start to finish.
What are you thinking as this is happening?
This is the way it's supposed to be.
Were the other crews surprised that you were winning so easily?
Yes, they didn't care for it. I'll tell you why. This is my estimation. Just before the last event, which was panel strafing, well, let me back up. They're going to issue 2 trophies, one for high individual and one for high group. Well, Captain Temple of our team was high individual. Through every event, he was high individual, and we as a team, through every event, a high group. So we had one more mission to go, which was panel strafing. There was a guy in a P-51 outfit that was close behind Temple for high individual. Now, this is my thinking. One more event to go. They didn't want to see us take everything. They wanted to get something out of this. We had a lock on the meet, so the only thing left is high individual. So we had it. One of the rules of the meet was if you have to abort, your team members take off, their score is counted, yours is 0. We had a guy in a 51 outfit who was close behind Temple. He had to abort. They gave him another airplane. Right there, they broke the rules. His score was so high, I think they gave him extra bullets for the event. Anyway, he aced Temple out of high place for a high individual. But we won the meet. However, we were never recognized as the winner. The Air Force Association puts out a magazine every month. Once a year, they put out an almanac. And in that almanac are the winners of each of the weapons meets from 1949 through present day. Today, it's called Red Flag. Anyway, each year when that almanac came out, the winner of the 1949 weapons meet was listed as unknown, unknown, unknown. Finally, in 1995, our group commander, Colonel Campbell, called Lieutenant Stewart and asked him if he had any information on the weapons meet. And he said, no, he didn't have it. Maybe I did. He called me, and I told him I didn't have it. Maybe he could find it at Wright Pat. So, Nellis. So he went to Nellis. He found what he was looking for, and he presented it to the Air Force. And as of April of 1995, it shows the 332nd as the winner of the 1949 weapons meet. 46 years. They knew who won, but they just didn't want to recognize us. So the only reason we were recognized is we had to submit the paperwork to Air Force.
Even as late as 1995.
1995.
They weren't admitting it. But now they do.
Now they do. It's on display. Well, let me back up again. We got a big 3-foot-high solid silver trophy. Somehow that got lost. We have a lady in Atlanta. Her name is Zellie Orr. She is a historian. She made it her mission to find it. She found it in 5 days at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum storage area. So she went to Wright-Pat. She saw the trophy, and she asked, why isn't this on display? They said, we got a lot of items in. We can't display everything, and this item will never be on display. Well, it is on display. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum right now. You go into the door out of the gift shop area. If you look about 130 or 40 degrees to your right, you can see it. But it is on display.
It's finally on display.
55 years in hiding.
Well, I'm glad it got found. That's pretty impressive in and of itself. So where were you stationed, other than when you were at Top Gun, between World War II and Korea?
Okay, let's see. I left Lockbourne. In the weapons meet was May of 49. Then in June of 49, they broke our group up and scattered us all over the world. The start of integration, really. Although it was supposed to have been in 48, but it didn't happen until 49 when they broke our group up. And Eddie Drummond, he was in the 99th. He and I were assigned to an air base in Misawa, Japan. But before we left, our records, our 201 file, had been sent to the commander, the wing commander at Misawa. And in there was our picture. So he called all the pilots into the base theater and said, we have these 2 Negro pilots coming in, and they will be assigned to one of the squadrons. Well, the pilots told us this themselves. They said, no way are we going to fly with them. No way. Anyway, Eddie Drummond and I report in to the wing commander. We chit-chat. And this is a military organization now. He said, what do you want us to call you? I said, well, I'm a first lieutenant. Eddie Drummond's a second lieutenant. How about Lieutenants Harvey and Drummond? Which is what it's supposed to be. And he said, okay. But then he made a mistake. He said, we have 3 fighter squadrons on the base, 2 P-51 squadrons and an F-80 squadron. Which one do you want to go to? Now, he asked me. I said, F-80. Why stand still? So he assigned us both to the F-80 squadron. Now, they didn't have a T-33 over there. That's a trainer for the F-80. But they did have an AT-6. That's what we flew in advance. In the back seat, they had a hood that you could pull up and you couldn't see out. All you could see are your instruments. Now, we each got 2 rides in the back seat of an AT-6. Okay, so I get in the back seat of the AT-6. I strap in the pilot up front. He starts the engine, gets clearance for takeoff, taxis out, lines up on the runway, said, okay, you've got it. So I'm in the back seat under the hood. I apply the throttle, down the runway, take off, pull up the gear, flaps, mixture control, prop pitch, all that stuff that I'm supposed to do. Fly around doing the maneuvers he wants me to do. Then I contact ground control approach, and they vector me in for a landing. When I touched down, the pilot up front took over. I had 2 flights like that. What does that have to do with flying the F-80? Nothing. I think they wanted to know or check to see if we could fly. Yeah. And we proved we could. We knew that, but they didn't. But anyway, we proved we could fly.
Again,
right.
World War II, Top Gun, now we're at the F-80s. So, Colonel Harvey, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more of your story on Veterans Chronicles. We're back on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Columbus, joined today by retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James Harvey III. And I want to get your assessment now, because you said you don't want to stand still. You wanted to move forward because you had been flying non-jets. What was it like to get in a jet compared to the previous planes?
No comparison. In the P-47, that was the latest one, propped aircraft that I flew. The controls, you push and pull. And the F-80, no, just a little pressure. That's all it took. No pushing and pulling, just a little pressure. And to make it do what you wanted it to do. And what a difference that was. Plus the speed, of course. And that's real flying. That's real flying.
So where were you when the Korean War broke out?
I was in Japan and at Misawa Air Base, which was up north. However, when it broke out, we were at gunnery training down in Osaka. So we moved from there to Itazuki, which is the next island down, the air base down there, and started flying missions out of there. And our first missions were flown over Seoul. And we circled over Seoul while they evacuated civilians out of Seoul. Just air cover and attack any aircraft that came in to disrupt the operation. But none came in, so it was no problem.
Now, you made some history while you were there because you became the first black fighter pilot to fly a jet.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Okay. Well, like I said before, Eddie Drummond and I, we're from Lockbourne. We were both assigned to the same squadron. He was a second lieutenant, and I was a first lieutenant. And I managed to get off the ground before he did, a couple of flights before. That made me the first one to fly missions in the Korean airspace.
Just by a few minutes, you set the record.
Right.
Excellent. And it was because you had a slightly higher rank, correct?
Right. I was the first lieutenant. He was the second lieutenant.
October 16th, 1950, you were involved in a mission for which you were later awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Tell us about that mission. Okay, on that mission, we were flying out of Itazuki, Japan. It was a bombing mission up in the northern part of Korea. So we went up there and we dropped our bombs on the target and we were headed back. We had a full load of 50 caliber ammunition. We got a call that some ground troops were pinned down by the enemy down this mountainous area in Korea. So we made contact with the people on the ground in the target area, and clouds around 800 feet down in the mountains. So we managed to drop down below the clouds and navigate through the mountains and find the target. They told us where it was, and we found it. And there were 4 of us. We had a full load of 50 caliber, and we emptied our guns into the area where they said the enemy was. And we left and went back to Itazuki, Japan. A couple weeks later, we got a message from the commander of that group, and he said we killed 1,500 of the enemy. So, which we were very effective. Well, so you have the muzzle velocity of the bullet plus the speed of the aircraft. You can do a lot of damage with one bullet. Any close calls in your missions in Korea?
I had one, I was taking off on a bombing mission, 2 500-pound bombs, taking off from Itazuki. Taking off from Itazuki. And, Taegu, taking off from Taegu. We had moved to Taegu. I took off and pulled up my gear, and then I got this vibration. The whole airplane was just shaking. And I called the tower and told them I had to come back for a landing because I was losing power. And so I came back and I landed. And what had happened, there's a rotor blade that turns, and there's a stator blade. And the stator blade is made just like the rotor blade, with all these little fins about so long, and they're shaped for the air to go through and help provide pressure. Anyway, and the rotor blade, when you lose a rotor blade, it comes out the tail of the aircraft. Mine did not do that. Mine dropped down between the rotor and the stator and wiped out all my stator blades. So therefore, I did not have the thrust that I was supposed to get. So I did manage to get it on the ground. So that was my only close call in Japan.
How active was the enemy?
Say again?
How active was the enemy? Do they have fighter pilots that you engaged with on a regular basis, or? No,
we did not engage with any fighter aircraft. I saw one. We were strafing this town. I pulled up and I saw this yak. Which yak it was, I don't know. Saw it heading north. So I pulled in behind it, pulled my trigger, got off a few rounds, nothing. I had expended all of my ammunition in the town, so I only got a few at the aircraft. But I did notice some white stuff coming from the wing root of the aircraft where it joined the fuselage. So what I assumed was I punctured the fuel tank. So how far north he got, I don't know. But that was it.
How many missions did you fly in Korea?
I flew 126. Now, when the war started, we didn't have a cutoff. And the Far Eastern Air Force commander was checking all the time. The group commander, or the wing commander, was in constant contact with the Far Eastern Air Force commander, wanting to know how many missions a pilot had to fly before he didn't have to fly any more missions. And nothing was coming down. Finally, on Christmas Day of 1950, it came down 100 missions. I had 126 at that point, so I didn't have to fly anymore.
You had 126 missions in just a couple months?
Yes. I lived in that airplane.
Wow. What happened then after you had reached the new threshold? What did they do with you?
I was sent back to Misawa, Japan. That was my home base. Went back to Misawa Air Base, stayed there until April of 51. Then I was sent to Victorville, California, George Air Force Base. F-86 outfit. So I'm moving up now in jets.
Yeah. Always moving up, right?
Right.
Exactly. Okay. So tell me about that assignment.
Okay. I got to Victorville, California, and they had F-86s, beautiful aircraft. And we had F-86As, and that's the first one they built. And the F-86 has slats on the leading edge. The slower your speed, the more the slats come out. But they were automatic. And so I got into that outfit, and I was assistant operations officer. I was instrument instructor pilot, and I was also a test pilot in that squadron.
How'd you like being the instructor?
I enjoyed it, yeah. It's good. Good assignment. Different airplane, faster airplane. Fighter pilots like speed.
What happened after Victorville?
I went to Norton Air Force Base as flying safety officer for the 27th NORAD region. We had a fighter squadron at Oxnard and one at Victorville. Victorville. And I was there in that job for a couple of years, and then I went to Newfoundland in 56.
When did you retire from the Air Force?
Oh, I retired from the Air Force in May of 65.
65.
22 years.
You had nothing to do with Vietnam?
Nothing in Vietnam. I was too close to retirement. That's why I didn't get to Vietnam.
What did you do after you retired from the Air Force?
Okay, I was at Truax in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where I retired. And I had a family. I had 4 girls, so I had to get a job. So United ran an article in the paper. They were hiring. So I interviewed with United, and I was told, you have all the qualifications, but we have an age cutoff. Okay, of 32. I said, okay, no problem. And about, maybe 15 years later, I found out from a guy who was higher than 65, a Caucasian guy. He said they didn't have it cut off. Then the light went on. They didn't want me. Anyway, that's water under the bridge. But Madison, Wisconsin at that time was the home office for Oscar Mayer. And so I interviewed with Oscar Mayer while I was still in the service. And they hired me to start off as a salesman. Anyway, when I said I retired the 31st of May, they said, okay, report this week. And I said I'd like a week off. They said, okay, report the 7th of June. So that's what I did. And I reported the 7th of June and started my training at Oscar Mayer from slaughter through completion of all the products. And I was supposed to learn everything about the whole operation so I could talk intelligently about the product when I was a salesman. So 1 month into the program at headquarters, they needed a salesman in northeastern New Jersey. So they sent me. Off I went with my family to northeastern New Jersey. Got a job as a salesman there. I was there for 3 years. Then went to Detroit, Michigan, and it was a promotion. And there I worked with salesmen. I was there for 18 months. Then went to Philadelphia as an assistant sales manager at the plant in Philadelphia. I was there for 3 years. And we used to go to marketing conferences, all the center managers. And in 71, November 71, we went to Disney World. And Disney World wasn't completely open, but Polynesian Village was. That's where we had our marketing conference. So the last day of the conference, I was sitting in the dining hall, and the president of Oscar Mayer came in and he said, may I join you? I was sitting by myself. I said, yes. So he sat down, we started talking, and he started talking about why I hadn't been promoted. He said, when the position opened in Portland, Oregon for a center manager, we didn't send you because we had a guy in the Western region who knew our operation well, so that's why we put him there. We had an opening in Salt Lake City. We didn't put you there because the way the Mormons thought about Negroes. They didn't want to subject me to that stuff. So I understood that. He said, where would you like to go? I said, I'd like to go to Denver. But the center manager in Denver, I know he doesn't want to leave. That was it. In March of 72, I'm sorry. March of 72, I got a call. Go to Los Angeles to the plant and interview with the Western Region manager for a job in Denver. So I went. We had lunch at a local restaurant. Asked me a lot of questions, and I answered, and that was it. I went back to my job in New Jersey as a district manager, and I got a call in April of 72. Said, you're going to Denver.
I've noticed a couple of times now in our conversation, both when you tried to enlist
right
in World War II, and they said no. And the same thing when you applied to be a pilot with United.
Right.
And it'd be very easy to be bitter or frustrated about it. And I'm sure you were frustrated on some level with it. But your attitude, as I listened to you, is simply, it's not worth it to belabor it, so you just moved on.
That's right.
Talk about that a little bit. That's not a common attitude, but it's
not.
It's very impressive. Everybody likes to complain, but you have suffered some great discrimination, but your attitude is amazing.
Yeah, well, I've always had a positive attitude. Don't dwell on the stuff that you have no control over. Just move on.
The Tuskegee Airmen, of course, have now been recognized in a number of different ways for your tremendous service to our country in World War II and elsewhere, including the Congressional Gold Medal.
Yes.
What has that recognition meant to you and to the Tuskegee Airmen in general?
Well, it's meant a lot to the Tuskegee Airmen in general. We finally got our recognition. When the group came back from overseas, touched foot on these American soil, classification of top secret was placed on the Tuskegee Airmen. They didn't want people to know about us because the program was too successful. And it wasn't supposed to be that way. And did you ever hear the Army War College report of 1925? It's a 68-page report on the American Negro and the Negro soldier during World War I. It's a 68-page report on garbage. And I've read it, and I don't want it in my psyche. And I give talks, and I quote parts of it. And the parts I quote, I read, because I don't want to internalize that stuff. And you may say, well, if you read it, you're going to get it in your psyche. I say no, because I belong to a certain group of seniors. We read something, we finish reading, we don't remember what we read. So therefore, it's not internalized.
It's easy to move on in that case, right? What are you most proud of from your incredible service to our country?
Well, being a Tuskegee Airman and winning the first ever Top Gun weapons meet. That's it, because it wasn't supposed to happen.
What do you think the legacy is of the Tuskegee Airmen?
Think positive, never quit, aim high, all the positive stuff.
It's an amazing career, and
it was.
And it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, sir. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you.
Retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James Harvey III, veteran of World War II and Korea. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles.